It's August 18th, 2 in the afternoon on a Monday here in Korea. Coming to you live from Seoul, I'm Laah Hyun-kyung, and these are the stories we are following at this hour. Pope Francis leaves a powerful message for the Korean peninsula. He urges South and North Korea to forgive each other and end the hostilities and military conflicts. South Korea and the U.S. meanwhile kick off joint annual military exercises. North Korea condemns them as a provocation, while Seoul and Washington stress they are strictly defensive in nature. Now, police and protesters continue their clashes in the U.S. state of Missouri after the shooting death of an unarmed teenager. This as a curfew goes into effect for a second night in a row. And we begin with Pope Francis. The Holy Father boarded a plane back to Rome on this Monday, ending his 5-day trip to Korea. Before his departure, he urged the two Koreas to forgive each other, saying that's what brothers do. Connie Kim has our top story.
Pope Francis brought to a close his 5-day trip with a peace and reconciliation mass at Myeongdong Cathedral in Seoul. After entering the church, the Pope reached out to 7 women seated in the front who were forced into sexual slavery by the Japanese military during World War II. The pontiff took time to listen to them and adorned a badge that was given to him by one of the former sex slaves. In his address to the hundreds in attendance, Pope Francis conveyed a message of forgiveness. Referring to Korea, a nation divided for more than 60 years, the Pope called for the two Koreas to reunite, calling them brothers and sisters and members of the same family.
Let us pray then for the emergence of new opportunities for dialogue, encounters and the resolution of differences, for continued generosity in providing humanitarian assistance to those in need.
Pope Francis' final public event in Korea was attended by about 1,000 people. Reflecting the pontiff's great interest in the marginalized and poor, they ranged from North Korean defectors and immigrant workers to the survivors and bereaved families of victims from April's ferry disaster. President Park Geun-hye was also present, making it her 3rd meeting with the Pope during his Korea trip. Before the Mass at Myeongdong Cathedral, Pope Francis met with the leaders of other religious groups in Korea, including Buddhists and Protestants, and emphasized the importance of harmony. It's a message that Pope Francis built his visit to Korea around, the first by a pope in 25 years. He made it a point to reach out to those who are suffering and whose voices have gone silent within society, calling for changes and compassion. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Now, the Pope is widely known for his love for the people in need, hence the nickname the People's Pope. He gave blessings to many groups in Korea, but his care for one in particular was especially noteworthy. Park Ji-won reports.
Despite his busy 5-day schedule in Korea, the Pope's special love and care for the bereaved families of April's Seoul ferry disaster was evident. His first encounter came last Friday in Daejeon, right before the Pope celebrated his first Mass with the Korean public. During the meeting, the families of the victims gave him a yellow ribbon, symbolizing the hope of the bereaved families, and the pontiff wore the ribbon right away.
We were heartbroken and deeply hurt by the accident. I really wanted to say thanks to the Pope for meeting us. When I saw him wearing the yellow ribbon during the Mass, I was really surprised. I felt renewed strength to go down this difficult path.
Pope Francis wrapped up the Mass with a special prayer for the victims.
In the sinking of the Seoul ferry.
On Saturday, during an open car parade before a beatification mass in Seoul's Gwanghwamun Square, Pope Francis got out of the car and walked towards family members where around 600 had been specially invited. He held hands with the father of a student victim who has been on hunger strike for about a month, urging the parliament to pass a special bill on the disaster to find out the exact cause of the sinking. The man gave the Pope a letter, and he put the letter into his pocket. And on Sunday, Pope Francis baptized another family member of the ferry victims, Lee Ho-jin, upon the request of Lee. It's extremely rare for the Pope to baptize a laity member, but the Pope Francis decided to do it to try and heal his wounded heart. The cross that Lee carried during a month-long pilgrimage over the country was delivered to the Pope, and he will take it back to the Vatican. The Pope's genuine listening not only consoled the hearts of the family members, but also the Korean public who witnessed his gentle love for the suffering families. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Now, whether the Pope's message will soothe tensions on the Korean peninsula remains to be seen, but as of now, it seems like the tensions will linger. Seoul and Washington commenced joint military drills this Monday despite threats from North Korea. Here's Kim Min-ji with more.
South Korea and the United States kicked off their annual military exercise on Monday. The computer simulation-aided joint Ulti Freedom Guardian drills, which run through next Friday, mobilizes roughly 50,000 South Korean and 30,000 U.S. troops. The main purpose of the exercise is to maintain security on the Korean peninsula while upholding joint defense capabilities between the two allies. This year, the exercise will involve the testing of a new tailored strategy, which is aimed at deterring North Korea's nuclear weapons or weapons of mass destruction. The strategy, drawn up at a security consultative meeting last year, stipulates diplomatic and military responses at different levels of threats posed by Pyongyang during times of peace or war. And like years gone by, the military exercise comes amid threats from North Korea. Pyongyang on Monday condemned the drill as a declaration of nuclear war. North Korea's Rodong Sinmun said the exercises violate peace on the peninsula, calling it a provocative act that hurts inter-Korean relations. The newspaper added that Seoul and Washington will be to blame for unpredictable situations on the Korean peninsula. Pyongyang also warned merciless preemptive attacks on Seoul during the weekend. The North has long denounced the exercise as a rehearsal for war against Pyongyang, while Seoul insists the drills are defensive in nature. South Korea's military said the exercise will go forward as planned amid strengthened surveillance and security against the North, adding that Seoul will respond firmly and without hesitation if the North engages in any form of provocation. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
In the meantime, South Korea continues to reach out to North Korea. It has once again called on Pyongyang to accept its proposal for a round of high-level talks. A statement issued by Seoul's Unification Ministry on Monday says the South is willing to discuss all pressing issues if North Korea shows sincerity about improving inter-Korean ties. Now, this means the two Koreas could discuss a possible lifting of South Korean sanctions against North Korea and the resumption of South Korean tours to Mount Kumgang. Last week, Seoul offered to hold high-level talks on August 19th, that's tomorrow, but said the date could be rescheduled upon Pyongyang's request. For today's Industry Insight, we talk about fast fashion brands. Our Connie Lee explains what the so-called SPA brands are, how the market evolved in Korea, and what it's like now.
They are the so-called fast fashion brands, or SPA brands, easily seen in Seoul's busy shopping districts. Over the past couple of years in Korea, there's been a growing demand for these SPA brands, with both foreign and domestic firms flooding the streets here in Korea.
I like these kinds of brands because their prices are reasonable and they have styles that are liked by most people.
SPA, short for Specialty Retailer of Private Label Apparel, had a market worth of about 500 billion won in the Korean market back in 2008. But has since grown to about 3 trillion won, or about $2.8 billion in 2013.
The SPA brands are changing the paradigm of the fashion industry in Korea. Before, we saw brands more focused on their brand image, but now it's about the retail store's image and how to meet the exact demands of its customers.
SPA brands do it all, from design to manufacturing and retailing. Thus, the prices are lower, and new items can be produced at a faster rate.
For many of these retail stores of SPA brands, there are new products that come in almost weekly. And for this store, apparently there are new products that are delivered every day.
Currently, the 3 biggest SPA brands in Korea are not homemade. They are Japan's Uniqlo, one of the first SPA brands to enter Korea in 2005, and Spain's Zara and Sweden's H&M. The local brands, which are latecomers to the SPA world, however, are not afraid to join in on the competition. Retail conglomerate Eland Group, which introduced Korea's first SPA brand called Spao in 2009, currently has more than 10 such brands under its belt. Their aim is global expansion, first by conquering Asia.
We found success with our first stores abroad in China and Japan, so we now plan to increase the number of our SPA brand stores in China to 50 next year. We have an edge over our foreign competitors because we design and produce according to the specific tastes of our Asian consumers.
And back in Korea, the already diluted market of SPA brands is still vied by newcomers from abroad. Canadian label Joe Fresh was recently introduced, and the UK's popular Topshop are apparently eyeing the market.
Global companies could see Korea as a test market, as Korean consumers are now recognized as trendsetters and fast adapters.
Connie Lee, Arirang News.
In the year 2012 for Korea was at its record high.
All of the day's important events close to home and around the world. Join Laah Hyun-kyung live from Seoul.
Mobile shopping market thinks the true meaning of creation shines through. Now, it's almost never fun to play the blame game, but apparently there is a group which the nation's top conglomerates think should take the blame for Korea's economy falling into a slow growth trap. Hwang Ji-hye tells us which group that is.
A new survey suggests Korea's legislative branch is to blame for the stall in government efforts to spur growth. More than 80% of the nation's 30 biggest conglomerates surveyed by the Joseonilbo Daily said the National Assembly was stifling economic progress. They pointed to the delayed passage of major economic stimulus bills as the reason. More than half of the companies said they would expand investments and hire more employees once the related legislation passes. Earlier this month, Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan urged the parliament to pass 30 long-pending stimulus bills as soon as possible. 19 of them have been awaiting approval by the National Assembly for more than a year now. After Finance Minister Choi took office in mid-July, the government laid out a set of aggressive stimulus measures expressing concerns about the possibility of a long, slow growth trend resembling that of Japan. If the bills aren't passed soon, experts are concerned the golden time to maintain recovery momentum could be missed. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
Following last week's key rate cut by the Bank of Korea, commercial banks are said to be planning on lowering their average deposit interest rates. Experts say this could bring about an adverse effect on the elderly who lean heavily on interest given by banks as their source of income. Kim Chan-ju has more.
These days, it's considered almost impossible to save a decent amount of money from the interest given by local banks.
I'm having a hard time making ends meet because the interest rate can't catch up with inflation.
Deposit interest rates here in Korea have dropped sharply over the last 6 years. The one-year fixed deposit rate that reached 5.87% in 2008 slipped to 2.68% in June. The rate has continued tumbling over the last 2 months, with most commercial banks currently offering interest rates in the low 2% range. But experts predict they'll go down even further after the Bank of Korea cut the benchmark interest rate by 0.25 percentage point to 2.25% last week. They say it might not be long before interest rates are in the 1% range, since the local economy is not showing strong enough signs of improvement.
We'll closely monitor the effects of the rate cut and come up with appropriate measures to deal with changes to consumer behavior and household debt.
Japan already experienced a similar situation and entered an ultra-low interest rate era a long time ago. Its 1 to 3 year fixed deposit rate averaged just 0.35% at its highest. The elderly suffered the most since many of them live off the interest on their savings. Local economists say Korea should come up with countermeasures such as raising pensions if it wants to avoid social and economic problems stemming from low interest. Kim Chan-ju, Arirang News.
Now, on the other hand, though, debt holders welcome the central bank's rate cut. The Financial Supervisory Service expects households and companies to pay around $1.8 billion less in interest payments annually as a result. The rate cut is expected to reduce local banks' profits in the short term, but an official from the agency says the profitability of the banks will improve in the long run as the move will decrease the likelihood of defaults by lenders. And moving on to sports, it took sudden death, but Korean golfer Park In-bi has won the 2014 Wegmans LPGA Championship, trailing American Brittany Lincecum by a single stroke going into the final round. Park finished off the final round at 11 under par overall, but Lincecum would bogey on the 18th, forcing a sudden death playoff between the two. Park seized the moment with a birdie, besting the Americans' par. The victory is Park's first LPGA Tour major win of the season and her second straight at the Wegmans. Over in the U.S., protesters and police in the state of Missouri, gripped by racial tensions, have reportedly been involved in violent clashes. A curfew went into effect for a second day on Sunday just a few minutes ago. But earlier in the evening, several tear gas canisters were thrown in multiple directions in a major intersection where crowds had gathered to protest what they perceive as racially motivated police violence. This is, of course, about the unarmed African-American teen Michael Brown, who was shot and killed by a white police officer some 9 days ago. Brown's family attorney says a private autopsy shows the teen was shot at least 6 times, including twice in the head. As many as 30 patients under observation for Ebola were reported to have fled a quarantine center in Liberia as it was being attacked. But there are now conflicting reports on the figure, as a senior health official said all the patients were removed to another medical facility. Saturday evening local time, looters reportedly called Ebola a hoax as they took medical equipment from the center, likely infected with the contagion, raising concerns of an expanded infection risk. Liberia has seen a growing number of Ebola cases. The latest WHO update said 116 new cases were registered between Tuesday and Wednesday of last week. The strike is seen as a huge setback in the struggle to contain the Ebola, which has killed more than 1,000 people in West Africa so far. Pope Francis was certainly busy touring Korea during his 5-day trip here, and so were some of the nation's top artists. Our Im Hyun-hee has the recent surge in arts and culture spurred on by none other than the Pope himself. Good afternoon, Yoon-hee.
Good afternoon. Right, so the Pope unfortunately has left the country. He wrapped up his trip nicely. But even before he came, we really saw an increase in the number of events, performances, and exhibitions in response to the Pope and his visit. So take a look.
Pope Francis held his first papal mass in Korea last Friday in the central city of Daejeon. The day featured a message from the Pope, and some of Korea's top stars contributed as well. Grammy Award-winning soprano Sumi Jo moved the crowds with her voice at the mass. Jo herself is a Catholic and performed Nella Fantasia, Ave Maria, and La Fantasia. She also sang Panis Angelicas during Pope Francis's papal mass ceremony. Another well-known singer, who comes from a strong Catholic background, is In Suni. She's a legendary figure in the industry and beloved by many. Amongst the some 50,000 attendees of the Mass, In Suni performed A Goose's Dream, one of the singer's hit songs, about believing in dreams and overcoming obstacles.
So many audience, did certainly enjoy the high-quality concerts, but there was also a collaboration between movie stars, a music video called Koinonia.
Right, so they did create this collaboration ahead of time before the Pope arrived, and this was in preparation for the Pope's arrival. But on top of creating performances for the Pope, in honor of the Pope, they also, some artists took it upon themselves to create things in honor of the martyrs, 124 who were beatified this weekend. So take a look.
Early Saturday, Pope Francis made his way to Gwanghwamun Square for the long-anticipated beatification ceremony. Another artist to contribute to the Pope's visit is pianist Baek Keon-woo. An accomplished pianist, Baek performed St. Francis of Assisi, Preaching to the Birds, which is an 8-minute piano composition by Liszt. Pope Francis is the first pope to take the name of Francis, after St. Francis of Assisi, a character known for his humility and humbleness. And alongside this ceremony was a large oil painting. Standing at 3 meters wide and 2 meters long, it shows the 124 martyrs who were persecuted in the late 18th and 19th centuries, seen wearing traditional white clothing. In their hands, they each hold a palm branch, a cross, and a lily, symbols of victory, martyrdom, and chastity in Catholicism. Of the 124, 100 were men and 24 were women. They included Anastasia Lee Bong-kum, the youngest martyr, aged only 12 at the time of her execution in 1839. She's seen holding a bunch of lilies and the Rose of Sharon, Korea's national flower.
It's a very moving depiction of the martyrs there. But you did mention before the show, before the newscast, that there was something special about the Pope's clothes.
Right. So on multiple occasions on the Pope's trip, he did mention this, this danger in material goods, right? And so the Pope's clothes, actually interesting, were handcrafted by 6 nuns from the Sister Disciples of the Divine Master community here based in Seoul. And so they took it upon themselves over 4 months. They hand-stitched each one of his robes that he wore for the beatification ceremony and the Mass held on Friday. So very special, those in themselves are artworks.
And you said there were certain skills and requirements that need to be made in order for them to have the finalized clothes or the robe.
So people were really saying his clothes kind of conveyed the Pope, hey, what he stands for is a very simplistic stance, a very simplistic robe, but beautiful. And so the nuns really displayed artistic talent there. They also created a statue of the Virgin Mary and the infant baby Jesus wearing Korean traditional clothes. And so that was an interesting statue that they did post on the altar during the beatification ceremony. So some beautiful artworks to contribute, to the culture of Korea now.
The Pope has left, but his what he left for us should linger.
Exactly.
All right. Thank you very much, Uni, for today's report.
A pleasure.
Happy Monday, everyone. I'm Michelle Park here with the latest weather forecast. Now, it's currently drizzling down here in Seoul, while heavy rain advisories and warnings are in effect in some regions down south. Now, we can expect some between 50 to 120 millimeters of rain to fall in both Gyeongsang-do provinces, while 100 millimeters is expected in the central and the southwestern regions. And on and off showers are forecast in Seoul and Gyeonggi-do province until tomorrow evening. Now, aside from the rain, there is a cool breeze in the air, and due to this rain, temperatures have dropped quite a bit, putting the highs into the low to mid-20s. Now, going over to our temperature readings, Seoul will top out this afternoon at 25. Meanwhile, the southern cities such as Gwangju and Busan will top out at 25 and 24 degrees. And moving over to other regions, Jeju Island tops into the 20s as well. Dokdo hits 20, while Mankungang stays into the low 20s. Well, that's all for now. Michelle Park, and back to you.
All right, thank you, Michelle. And that's all we have for you now. Thank you for watching. I'll be back with more at 4 p.m. Korea time.